The first thing that we do now is we do what we call an assessment and saying, you know what, I know you want help here, right? You might want help with your maintenance operations, but let's just assess the whole system.
You said blending lean, operations, and supply chain management.
Yes.
Can you kind of give me your opinion on what the difference is between the three when you say blending them together?
When I start that presentation off, I look around and it's like any lawyers, any accountants, any IT companies, any software companies. I look around for the companies that I think to themselves, this doesn't apply to me. And I just tell them, this is to you. We're designing this for you to implement.
The 25 years that you've been in business with Supply Velocity and the companies you've worked with, they're some of the biggest names that you can imagine locally, nationally. And I'm sure you've worked with a ton of small companies as well, because you've worked with over 100 of them.
Yep.
Given your experience in operations management, supply chain management, what would you do, or what did your typical process look like back then when you were taking on a consulting gig versus now? Is there like a set checklist you have for the first 30 days, or is every case or company or issue different?
The difference back then and the difference now is really, it just comes back down to this. Back then, if there was an opportunity, I wanted to help solve it. And so we would attempt in our sales process to sort of dive right in. And now we've learned that sometimes going a little slower actually turns out to be going much faster because you get sustainable results. So the first thing that we do now is we do what we call an assessment. And we say, hey, yes, I could help you with that warehouse. I could help you with your inventory. I could help you, create a lean strategy. But what I'm going to do first is just assess what the opportunities are in your company to make sure, and you set in on this presentation, which is something that we've sort of created, which we call lean system design. It's really blending lean operations and supply chain together and saying, you know what, I know you want help here, right? You might want help with your maintenance operations, but let's just assess the whole system and make sure that there aren't other things that have to get fixed first. And so we look a little more holistically. We've been around longer. We kind of have the bona fides that we can get away with that and do it. But I would say that's the difference, that assessment, which we've been doing now for 10, 12 years. And now every time I want to go around that process, because I'm like, oh, we can just go straight to the proposal and figure this out. My partners will say, hey, that's not our process. Our process is assessment, analysis, design, implementation. And so I would say if that 4-step checklist at the highest level, that's now our process. Back then, we're like, let's just go. And sometimes we'd be working on the wrong problem.
That makes sense. You mentioned something that I found very interesting. You said blending lean, operations, and supply chain management.
Yes.
So for those of us that don't know, what's the difference between the three? Because I feel like they can, if you don't know the difference, they can all be viewed as one and the same. So can you kind of give me just your opinion on what the difference is between the three when you say blending them together?
Sure. Lean is a way to streamline operations management. So those are closely tied. So lean, there's really 3 definitions. I think a lot of people might know, but put together by Toyota as their operations management model as a way to identify and eliminate non-value-added work in the workplace. So they have a continuous improvement mindset, a deep and profound respect for the people that do the work. And so it's an employee engagement mindset. And finally, swift and even flow, which is, I don't care how variable things come into your process, your customers want it fast, and it's got to come out evenly. So demand could spike. Customers say, so what? You promised 2 days, I want 2 days. And you're like, no, but we're dealing with 300% demand. Customers want swift and even flow. So lean embraces those 3 things, and it applies them to operations management. This idea of lean system design came from blending my supply chain knowledge that I've gained. It's been a long time now, 15 years ago, going back to school and getting my doctorate. And it was really about supply chain as an interconnectedness. It's a system. suppliers and transportation and production and distribution and delivery and return and planning. And I kind of looked at supply chain and I looked at lean, and they're never spoken about together. And I said, well, those really are kind of, if we put the two together, we create this lean system design. And what it allows us to do is, I think even, Raj, companies like yours at first might think, well, we're not a supply chain company, we do apartments, but a lean system? Sure, I can do that. And then if I can get that mindset, I can say, well, look at all the paint that you've got and look at all the plumbing supplies that you have. And I'm like, well, you really are a supply chain company, but it lets us get people thinking about supply chain that maybe never did think about it before. And with that same three key mindset, identify and eliminate non-evaluated work, deep and profound respect for the people that do the work, and swift and even flow. And so, and by the way, people think that I've been thinking this way for decades, but really, it took 2 decades of working in these areas, and all of a sudden, I don't want to say it came to me, but it kind of came to me, and I thought, oh, this is how the two come together. And so we've only been speaking about it and promoting it since last year.
Interesting. Your presentation was so effective that I thought you've been doing that same presentation for a number of years. So it's interesting that you say it's relatively new. So when I think of lean, or when I used to think of lean prior to your presentation, I was thinking about manufacturing companies. Mm-hmm. The same thing for supply chain management. So what you're saying is lean and supply chain management and your system can effectively be implemented in more or less any type of company. Is that correct?
Absolutely any type of company. And so when I start off that presentation, which, by the way, I remember the first time I actually did that presentation, and I had note cards. And so during breaks, I would look at the note cards, and I remember somebody came over to me. I'm like, oh, you must have presented this 100 times. And I didn't want to tell them, no, this is the first. Even a brain surgeon does brain surgery the first time. So yeah, but at this time, I've done it tens and tens of times, but I can remember the first that I did. So when I start that presentation off, I look around and it's like any lawyers, any accountants, any IT companies, any software companies. I look around for the companies that I think to themselves, this doesn't apply to me. And I just tell them, this is to you. We're designing this for you to implement. And then I'll go backwards a little bit and talk about hospitality and restaurants, hotels, apartments. And then that becomes easier because I'm like, you move material all the time. All you're doing is moving material. And then I'll go back into distributors who also don't think it applies to them. And I'll talk about, well, they've got inventory and they've got fork trucks. But I designed lean system design around all those companies that have no physical anything going through their process. And how can they get all of that benefit? Because they have a process. And, and you get lucky, Raj. Like I had a very large accounting firm here in town. And they actually took a chance. They're like, we want to be lean. And, I might have at first looked at them and said, wow, this is like, this is a first for me. But they came to me and said, we want to be lean. And doing taxes, doing your annual audit, guess what? It's not any different than you turning over an apartment, which is no different than a distributor filling an order or a construction company building an apartment complex. And it's all a process.
Is that process one that's followed in the software that you also co-founded or founded?
That software company was actually inventory optimization software. I told you I was a mathematician, so my partner, I built some, today they're called machine learning models or artificial intelligence, and it helps finished goods distributors come up with the optimal amount of inventory. So that software is very niche, focused on that application. To be honest, every time I start one of these other companies, the food company was another one, I find myself spending a few years there, and somehow I end up back in the consulting as being my primary, motivator.